The defense admitted that there were shots fired that morning, but added that there were also sounds of a cricket bat striking hard against the toilet door, and that the noises sounded similar and could easily have been mistaken for shots. This was not contradicted. During the course of the trial, it became clear that some of the sounds that witnesses interpreted as gunshots were actually not gunshots, but sounds of a cricket bat striking against the toilet door. It was also not contradicted that the shots were fired first and that the striking of the door using a cricket bat followed thereafter.
Judge Masipa said the head wound would have incapacitated Steenkamp immediately, and therefore the only other person who could have screamed was the accused.
This suggested that the deceased probably did not breathe more than a few seconds after sustaining this wound. The shots were fired in quick succession. In my view, this means that the deceased would have been unable to shout or scream, at least not in the manner described by those witnesses who were adamant that they had heard a woman scream repeatedly.
Judge Masipa read a short piece from Pistorius' testimony where he described the moments leading up to the shooting.
The bathroom lights were off, but he could see from the entrance that the bathroom window was open while the toilet door was closed. There was no one in the bathroom. He did not know whether the intruder or intruders were on a step ladder outside the bathroom window or were inside the toilet. He had his firearm pointed in front of him. He then had a movement inside the toilet and thought that whoever was in the toilet was coming out to attack him. Counsel for the defense argued that while the accused had in fact approached the bathroom in a state of readiness to defend himself and the deceased against a perceived threat, he did not consciously discharge his firearm in the direction of the toilet door. He argued that from the evidence of the accused, it is clear that the conduct of the accused and the death of the deceased were an accident.
Judge Masipa says neither the state nor the defense has submitted evidence reflecting the true nature of the relationship between Pistorius and Steenkamp.
The state also led the evidence of WhatsApp messages that went to and fro the accused and the deceased a few weeks before the deceased was killed. The purpose of such evidence was to demonstrate to this court that the relationship between the accused and the deceased was on the rocks, and that the accused had a good reason to want to kill the deceased. In a bid to persuade this court otherwise, the defendant or the defense placed on record more WhatsApp messages that painted a picture of a loving couple. In my view, none of this evidence from the state or from the defense proves anything.
She also read evidence of Reeva Steenkamp's post-mortem results.
Counsel for the state submitted that this fact was a strong indication that dinner was not at 1900 hours the night before, as alleged by the accused, but closer to the time when the deceased was shot dead. He argued that that would explain the, I quote, argument, close quote, that was heard by Mrs. van der Merwe just after she had woken up at 1:56. This argument seems to lose sight of the following. One, that the experts agreed that gastric emptying was not an exact science. It would therefore be unwise for this court to even attempt to figure out what the presence of partially digested food might mean, as the evidence before this court is inconclusive.
We now cross live to our reporter Patricia Versace, who is at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, to give us a wrap of today's proceedings. And of course, she will be joined by forensic analyst Ms. Laurie James. Patricia, Judge Masipa being very thorough today. At this stage, perhaps a bit of a blow for Gerinel. Take us through.
Yes, it's certainly been a verdict that has attracted widespread reaction, from some people saying that's exactly what they were expecting from her verdict today, and some saying that it seems like she basically just went beyond and disregarded the state's case and the evidence brought before her by the state. So it really is a judgment that has attracted widespread of reaction. You would know since this morning here at the North Gauteng High Court, it has been, a hype of activity with ordinary members of the public descending here at the High Court and members of the media, legal experts who all have a keen interest in this case. So already, although Judge Thokozile Masipa's verdict is not finalized, we already see reaction. And right here next to me, I have the ANC Women's League spokesperson in Gauteng, and that is Mama Jackie Mufokeng, who will give us the reaction from the Women's League side.
I must say that it's very confusing at the moment. You can imagine during lunchtime when Judge Masipa ruled out murder and then premeditated murder and left with culpable homicide. We are wondering what is going to be next. Even now she was moving deeper into actually justifying that. We are just saying that we'll see tomorrow, but it's very worrying, and it can be a very sad day if South Africans can find this man going out, walking just like that, and noting what is happening. We don't know what is happening in Mamelodi. As a woman myself, I'm very worried that if there's an allegation of a serial killer at large, and then you get a case like this going the other way around, not actually giving confidence, it can actually really disturb a lot of us. For now, we still have a confidence in the state case, and I'm sure they know better. And Judge Masipa must be actually given space and the benefit of the doubt that as the day goes tomorrow, we'll see another side of it.
And there you have it, the ANC Women's League spokesperson, Mama Jackie Mufokeng, giving us, the reaction from the ANC Women's League so far, but still reflecting that there is still hope as the verdict has not reached its final stage. Now, you would remember throughout the judgment today, one of the aspects that Judge Thokozile Masipa touched on was the testimony of the Paralympian Oscar Pistorius when he testified in his own defense. Basically, she went on to label him a poor witness. She said his performance on the stand was very poor. He was evasive. But regardless of the fact that she, say that he performed poorly, she still ruled out the charge of premeditated murder and the charge of murder on dolus eventualis. And right now, I'm joined by Laurie James. She's a forensic expert who's been tracking this case alongside us. Now, Laurie, you are one of the people who expressed shock that, the fact that Judge Thokozile Masipa, said that Oscar Pistorius' testimony was poor, but yet we saw her ruling against premeditated murder and also against murder on dolus eventualis. What do you make of that?
Well, it was actually that she took it further than saying that his evidence was poor. She actually went so far as to say that his evidence was untruthful, and then proceeded to rule, completely accepting his version of events of an intruder being present. So that I found extremely confusing. Later on, she went on to lay out a foundation, I think, for a possible conviction on culpable homicide, but what she laid out for me personally was the requirements for a conviction on dolus eventualis.
Now, some legal experts that we have been speaking to on the ground have already gone and criticized her, said it seems like there's a misinterpretation of the law. Do you agree, or is it really just people being emotional here?
Well, I think emotions are running high, so we do have to take that into account. But, on the basis of her explanations of the interpretation of the evidence, I would have to say that I do agree. There may indeed be grounds for an appeal by the state. And I think it's going to be very odd that the appeal is probably going to come from the state and not from the defense in this case.
Obviously, culpable homicide seems like the next probable option for her. Is there another scenario, or is really that just what we're looking at? And what are the different categories that can follow under culpable homicide?
Well, there are various other composite verdicts that could be applied in a murder case, but they don't really apply here. So, for example, if you're charged with murder, you could actually be found guilty on a composite verdict of assault. But I don't think that applies here. So I think we are looking at the culpable homicide charge, and I think she is laying a foundation, or in the latter part of the day, she did lay a foundation for a conviction on culpable homicide. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is the way it goes.
She basically, in a way, ruled out a whole lot of testimonies from the neighbors who came to testify about the blood-curdling screams that woke them up on the morning of Valentine's Day. And she even went to say that there were only 2 people in that house. There were no eyewitnesses, and the evidence is very circumstantial.
Yes, the evidence is circumstantial. Obviously, the entire case is circumstantial, so to speak, because the only eyewitness is Oscar Pistorius. So if she accepts Oscar Pistorius' version as the only eyewitness, then she will probably rule guilty on the culpable homicide, because by his own evidence that he gave, it indicated negligence. So yes, I would go that far, yes.
And as you have said, it seems like we still have a long journey ahead, as the state will probably appeal against a whole lot of elements of her verdict. And some members have already indicated in that direction.
Yes, we did hear from certain members of the NPA that they are considering it, yes.
All right. And that, of course, being a forensic analyst, Laurie James, just giving us a wrap of today's court proceedings, the first day of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial judgment. Of course, tomorrow it continues when Judge Thokozile Masipa will give us, the final wrap-up of her verdict in this matter. Of course, we also know that there are alternative charges that the Paralympian face, and those relating to him being charged with contravening the country's Firearms Control Act, relating to several matters where he, for instance, shot through the sunroof of a moving vehicle, and of course discharging his firearm in a packed restaurant in Johannesburg. So we're expecting her to deal with those matters tomorrow, as well as her elements relating to a possible culpable homicide conviction tomorrow when we return.
Before I let you go, the interest in this trial seemed to be higher today than the first day, with both the main courtroom overflowing and it was filled to capacity. There was also a lot of activity outside. Please paint us a picture of what happened today. All right. We seem to have lost Patricia Visagie there. We will continue, of course, when judgment resumes tomorrow. Well, it's time now to take